Welcome to CUTV News Forum. I'm Alan Scholnikoff, and with me today is Professor Paris Arnopoulos of Concordia's Political Science Department. He's the past president of the United Nations Association in Quebec and is currently a member of the Development Education Committee. He's here to talk to us about the North-South Dialogue, that is a program that's being implemented by various governments in the industrial countries around the world. What exactly is North-South Dialogue?
The dialogue is a debate that is going on between the governments of the Southern Hemisphere of the world with the governments of the Northern Hemisphere of the world. As you know, in the world there are about 160 nation states which belong to the United Nations as well. And of these 160, about 120 are the so-called poor or less developed nations, and the other 40 are the so-called rich or the more developed nations. And the debate is going on between the 120 on the one hand and the 40 on the other hand, mostly in the United Nations, on how much can the rich nations help the poor nations.
Yeah, former Chancellor Willy Brandt has come out with a proposal last year with plans to improve the world economies and creating the South more self-sufficient.
Yes.
I believe there's some Canadian reports on that.
Yes, the Brand report came out about a year ago. The Brand report was created by a commission, an international commission, chaired by Willy Brandt. And as a result of that, the Canadian government instituted a task force, a parliamentary task force on the North-South relations, which worked during the summer and the fall and came out with its report that you see in the camera. About the same time, also, the North-South Institute in Ottawa, a private institute, also came out with their report.
That's
right, the blue one, in the Canadian interest, rather. Both of which is an unofficial Canadian response to the Brand Commission report.
Okay, was there any time schedule for implementation of these proposals?
Well, usually we're talking of the 80s, a decade.
Okay, so it's still under discussion.
Yes.
I imagine food, like I mentioned before, is one of the major topics.
Yes.
What's the aim? Is it to give aid to these countries or to make them self-sufficient in their food? And is that feasible?
Well, as you know, again, the poor countries, one of their major problems is that the people in those countries don't have enough to eat. And very often there is famine, malnutrition. So this is perhaps the most important thing that everybody has to worry about, that we shouldn't let people die of hunger.
What about
that's the first problem.
Population? And there's also a problem in these countries that have the least food, they have the highest population.
That's right. The world's population now is over 4 billion people. And of these 4 billion people, about 3 billion people live in the south, in the southern countries, and about 1 billion in the north. So we're talking of more than half the population of the world that lives in conditions which are not very healthy, both from the point of view of food, water, housing, everything.
As well as food, is there a way they're thinking to develop a strong economy in these countries?
Oh yes. So first, the first problem would be how can they grow enough food to feed their population? Okay. Once they do that, or in parallel with that, then the idea is to develop their industry, build their industry factories to produce goods like houses, for example, tools, which will help the other sectors of their economy than food. Okay, so that's the next thing: industrialization. How can these countries industrialize so that they can give more things to their people?
Mm-hmm. When we get to a situation like that, they're no longer going to be inferior in as far as taking care of their own people. Then we're going to have a what's going to happen then?
Yeah, if we get to that situation,
right,
they're not.
Okay.
Then now the big problem is will we get to this situation, and how can we get to this situation in 10 or 20 years? Because that's a very difficult task indeed to do. So Brand Commission makes various proposals on how to arrive at this situation, not a situation where the poor countries are going to be as rich as we are, because that would be a bit too idealistic, but at least that they would be good enough to supply the people with the minimum requirements, a poverty level, what we would consider here in Canada, enough simply to eat and be clothed, enough medical care. Okay? And we feel that 10 years, this is the time that the Brand Commission and the other reports give the world, to help these countries arrive at this minimal level requirement for a decent human living.
We've discussed government so far. What about the large corporations, what they call the transnationals? Are they going to have a major role in this?
Well, I wouldn't say a major role in this planning, although they will have a role. The idea is that the government should do most of this planning, because the corporations are not really interested in what we are talking about. What they're interested in is, like any corporation, make a profit. Now, if that helps people, well and good, but if it doesn't, it's not up to them. Corporations are not created in order to develop the world, but in order to help their own shareholders.
Because it seems to me that now that the Western economies are saturated, the markets are saturated, inflation's high, you're just looking for another possibly artificial means of supporting these companies for years to come, until that market's saturated, and hopefully our economies will be stronger by then, and then forget them, you know, and we're back to square one. Is there some...
Well, I hope that's not the way it's going to be.
Right.
What you mentioned, I suppose it could happen in that way. But the idea is that this should not happen. We should try to avoid doing that. And this can be done by the governments controlling as much as possible the multinational corporations. Corporations are companies. The governments are responsible in making sure that these corporations do not exploit unduly the people in the third world, as well as here, for that matter.
As far as cash aid, what contributions are the various countries making?
Well, let's speak for Canada.
Right.
To begin with, Canada is giving aid through our agency. We have a special agency in Canada for giving aid to the third world, and the amount every year by now has passed over $1 billion Canadian money. But still, even though $1 billion seems to be a lot of money, it is only less than half of 1% of our gross national product. One of the recommendations of the Brand report was to increase this percentage to 0.7% within the next 10 years. And the Canadian government has more or less accepted this goal. So by 1990, we hope to more than double, both in percentage and in actual figures, the amount of money that you give.
It sounds like a lot of money, considering the population of Canada. But how long, I mean, to what extent can Canadian economy, Canadian people afford that?
Well,
without dropping the standard of living in Canada.
Oh no, we can afford that indefinitely, but the idea is that we shouldn't keep doing that indefinitely, even if we can afford it, because part of this aid is going in trying to make the people of the third world self-sufficient, so that they don't need it anymore.
So we're not talking of a situation where we're going to have to meet, not halfway, but we're going to have to lower the standard of living.
Oh no, there's no way. No? I mean, as I said, this is 0.5% of our GNP. Right. So you might say, if you like, that we are lowering our standard of living 0.5%. I mean, this is insignificant, really, you know, to make sure that people don't die of hunger. Surely that's the least we can do.
What type of governing bodies will be available to make sure that these countries get the right type of aid, the right type of equipment that they're buying from these corporations? Is there any type of policing?
Yeah. Well, aid, to take the example of Canadian aid, is partly given directly, Canada and another country, X, Y, or Z, or through the United Nations. We give money to the United Nations, to special agencies of the United Nations, and the United Nations then decides how to share this aid among the needy countries. So there are two ways, either directly, bilaterally between Canada and other nations, or multilaterally through the United Nations.
So the undertones for all this are very sort of peaceful, coexisting between all the peoples of the world, yet the military budgets in the world are tremendous.
That's another scandal, that every year the world governments are spending about $500 billion, or $500 billion in armaments.
So what's the total aid right now?
It's about $10 billion. So $10 billion compared to $500 billion, you can see the difference. We're spending much more for arms than we spend to help people. So many people, including the Brand Commission and our parliamentary task force, have suggested we take some money from the armaments industry and we put them to development aid.
How receptive are they to that so far?
Well, all governments say, yes, that's a good idea, but when it comes to doing it, of course, it's another thing. That's unfortunate that the nations feel so insecure that they don't want to decrease their military budgets. Now, how can we make them decrease their military budgets would depend on how much pressure the governments get from people, like us. If people say to the governments, no, we don't need that much arms, let's cut down on arms, then if there is sufficient pressure, the government will respond. So that's the idea.
There's other forms of dominating the world other than militarily. Isn't this going to create an even stronger power base among the current leaders of the world in controlling these people by feeding them? Maybe they're going to be relying on our technology. They might be self-sufficient, but they might need fertilizers.
Oh, no, that's the whole point. No, the idea is, again, that we should make sure that within 10 or 20 years at the most, they don't rely on our fertilizers, that they are able to grow their own food by their own means, organically, you might say, not by having to buy fertilizer, but because fertilizers are dependent on petroleum, and petroleum is so expensive. This is one of the reasons that they cannot grow their food, because it has become so expensive that they cannot afford it.
It sounds to me like there's a large education process that has to be undertaken before.
That's right. There's so many things, so many problems that we have to do. And such education, first of all, to get the people to realize what the problems are, to raise the consciousness of people, to see the world as it is, and also to see the world as one unit, rather than what do we care about what is going on in the underdeveloped countries. We are all implicated together. We are all in this together.
Prime Minister Trudeau just mentioned something to that effect his last trip.
Yeah. So I think that Trudeau has realized this idea, and he is pushing the North-South dialogue, that the governments from the North and governments from the South must get together to see how they can resolve this problem. And he has been making trips around the world, as you know, trying to get the leaders of various nations together. And in next summer in Ottawa, there will be a summit conference among the leaders of the 7 industrial nations to see whether the rich countries can decide on a common policy. And then the southern countries will also meet together and see if they can decide their common policy, and then the two will come together and see if they can negotiate between themselves some kind of an agreement.
Is there any way an individual, such as myself, a student, or any member of the community, can provide input?
Yes, by telling the Canadian government how much you support the North-South dialogue, that how much you feel that the Canadian government should do as much as possible in helping the third world, and that how much the Canadian government should try to get the Americans, which are much stronger than we are, also to get involved in this North-South dialogue.
Well, if it's implemented, how do you see the world in 20 years?
Well, I certainly see it much better than it is now.
Yeah.
There's no question of that.
Is that a feasible time frame for?
I would rather see it much sooner than 10 or 20 years, but unfortunately things move very slowly in this world. So if we can do it in 10 or 20 years by the year 2000, I'd be very glad.
Okay, thanks for coming in today.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for joining us. CUTV News Forum.